What's going on, guys? Welcome to today's video. In the last one, we got the RB20 for the Cefiro stripped down from a complete motor to a bare long block, which we've got right here. Got my pistons laid out, my crank and the cradle. To start this video off, I'm going to be cleaning a lot of things because in this video, we're gonna get this motor back together, complete, and pretty much ready to be thrown into the Cefiro. Over the last couple of days, I've been busy running around collecting various different bits and pieces that I need to get this back together. Picked up a bottom end seal kit, which has our rear main seal, front main seal, things like that, which is good, need that. Also picked up some new head bolts. The head bolts that were on this motor were actually brand new when I did initially put this together about a year ago, but with factory head bolts, they're actually designed to stretch. So once you torque them down to their correct settings, you can't take them out and reuse them again. You actually got to get new head bolts. It's a bit of a shame that I brought new ones a while ago and they're pretty much junk, but yeah, it is what it is. It's better to use brand new ones and have that peace of mind rather than using secondhand ones and always be worrying about if the head's gonna lift or something, or the head gasket's gonna blow because it's not clamping it down properly. It's a stinking hot Friday afternoon, so while I clean this, I'm drinking a beer as we go. So yeah, that's gonna be what I do first, is I'm gonna go through, clean up everything, clean all the rods, clean up all the gunk and stuff on them, clean up the crank, clean up the bearings as well, because I did have brand new bearings in these, so yeah, we'll just wipe all the gunk off them. And then once it's clean, we'll start putting it all together, but yeah, I'll probably chuck you guys on a bit of a time lapse while I clean this stuff, and then yeah, we'll get into building it. I've gone through and I've cleaned everything in the bottom end, cleaned the crank, cleaned all the bearings, cleaned the rods, cleaned the cradle, and I've even gone through the block, cleaned all the journals, even cleaned the all the insides around here, just wiped it all down. We've got all the gasket gooey crap off the bottom of the motor here for the sump, so when I go to put the sump on, it's good. Cleaned all the front of the motor where the oil pump goes and the water pump. So with everything cleaned, I am about to start assembling this. I went through just then and I made sure all the oil squirters were torqued to the correct setting. I torqued them to 25 foot-pounds. I gotta give a quick shout out to Alex Perlier for letting me borrow his torque wrenches. He's let me borrow his 1/2 inch one and his 3/8 as I knock a Powerade bottle off. I do have a torque wrench, but it is this one here, which is a Tool Pro one. This is just your run-of-the-mill, super cheap auto Chinese type torque wrench, and I do not trust that thing to put a bottom end together. When it comes to torque specs on an engine, they are super important. Something that is going to be out by a few foot-pounds could literally mean you destroying your motor. First, what we're going to do is we're going to take our bearings. We're going to take these ones here. So these are going into the block for the crank. These ones are different for the ones that go on this side of the cradle, because you can see how they've got this groove in them and this hole. So that hole is where the oil comes out, and this groove is basically so that oil can disperse. Before we chuck our crank down, we've got my engine assembly lube. This is stuff I've had for a while. One of my mates thought it'd be funny and cross some words out, so you know, it's gin arse lube. Very mature, but yeah, so we'll put some of this on the bearings. Before I put the crank cradle down, I just put some assembly lube on this side of the bearings as well. So yeah, there's a lube on both sides. With the crank in and all the cradle bolts all zipped up with the electric ratchet, now I'm going to grab our torque wrench and we're going to tighten these up. I'm going to do them in stages first. The first stage I'm going to go through is 30 foot-pound, just because that's the lowest that this will actually go to. And then once we do 30, then I'll do a final pass of 50. I've gone through them all. They're all tight, torque to spec, but now I'm just gonna double check every single one. It's worth spending that extra time and making sure everything is done up properly, because if you miss one of these, it'll be catastrophic. Now is the long, tedious part of getting the pistons and rods in. First off, I'm gonna go through and chuck all these bearings on the rods and the caps. And then I say long, tedious because you gotta flip the motor every which way every so often. There is a trick to do it. Instead of doing piston by piston, you do basically 2 pistons at once. So what I'll do first is I'll do piston number 1, piston number 6, then we'll do 2 and 5, and then 3 and 4. Like the crank, all these caps have a little groove in them, and then the bearings have a little bit that sticks out, which once again means that they can only go in one way. On the rod, again, it's got that groove, so the bearing sits in there like that. Actually just realised the easier way to put these in is I was initially trying to just put them in like that, but you put the little groove up against there and then you just push down on the other side. Goes in way easier. It's the same, work smarter, not harder. Now it's time to chuck our pistons in. I'm not entirely sure if this is actually 100% accurate. This is just how we did it the last time, so I'm going to do it again this time. With the top 2 rings, I'm going to put the middle ring having the gap on this side, and then with the top ring, we'll have the gap on the opposite side of the piston. Then what we'll do, let's chuck our ring compressor over it like that. Tighten that up. I don't think it matters as much for DEs, but with DETs it really does matter which way the piston goes, because we have oil squirters in the block, so you can see in the piston here that it's got like a little cutout to clear that oil squirter. So these have to go facing the rear. With the motor flipped on the side like this, I can get the rod caps on. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to knit them up, and then once I've got all 6 on, I'll flip the motor back upside down completely and we'll torque all of them with all of the pistons on the crank. Make sure you lube up things, because if you don't lube up this stuff, when you go to start it, you will very likely run a bearing on startup, and yeah, that's not a good time. For this, I'm going to use the 3/8 torque wrench, because the 1/2 inch one only goes down to 30 foot-pounds, and that is going to be pretty much our max torque setting for what we want to do with these rod bolts. So first off, I'm going to start at 20 foot-pounds on the 3/8, and then we'll go up to, I think it's 30 or just over. Can't remember, I have to double check, but we do it in 2 stages. So yeah, we'll do the first one of 20 foot-pounds, and then we'll do the final one of whatever it is. I think it's like 30 or 32. So about to chuck my oil pump on.
Yeah.
What was that?
Nothing.
What was that?
Nothing.
So yeah, about to put my oil pump on, and we've got our new oil pump gasket in amongst this kit. So we'll crack this open. That's our oil pump gasket right there. So I've just put some goo over here because I'm using a Permatex seal, and these aren't known for being the greatest of quality, so I figured a thin layer of sealant should hopefully mean that we don't get any leaks. And it also acts as a thing to help the gasket stick to where it needs to go. So got the oil pump on and got the new front seal in. Also put the sump on, and I put this rear plate on as well. So the bottom end of this is 100% complete. Obviously before I chuck the sump on, got the oil pickup on there as well. but now I am going to put this head on. A year ago when I first built this motor, I had all of the machine work done. So this deck has been machined and so is the head. I put the head gasket on and I clamped the head down and it's sat around ever since. When I was going to pull this motor apart, I wasn't too sure what I was going to be doing with the head gasket situation, because even though we had torqued it down, it never ran the motor, so I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to reuse it or not. But I talked to the guys that did all of the machine work on this motor. They've built tons of RBs, including RBs that are well over 800,000 horsepower, and they said that reusing this head gasket is fine because it was only torqued down and was never actually ran, so it never went through any heat cycles, so it didn't actually stick to the head. When I did pull the head off of it, it came off sweet and it is still good to go. Just to be on the safe side, I did go and pick up some copper spray. This is basically just to give a bit of insurance, but yeah, spray this on the head gasket and then we can chuck this head on. So we got the head in place. I put a couple of the old bolts. I put one in this corner, one in that corner, just to make sure it was lined up properly. So I went up to, it was just under 50 foot-pound, and then I loosened them all up. And I forgot to put oil on the head bolts. Usually the head bolts would come with some antifreeze, but this set didn't come with it. So yeah, after I loosened them up, I pulled each bolt out one by one and just dipped it in a bit of oil. And I've tightened it back up to 30 foot-pounds now. So next we're gonna go to 50 and then we'll do a final pass through at 70. Head bolted back down now. It's time to put everything from the head back in it. We got the lifters, cams, cam caps, and then yeah, we can put the cam gear back on. I'm not putting this water pump back on. I've actually got a pretty much brand new water pump sitting on one of my 25 DET blocks that I've got at the storage unit. The 25 DET that actually originally came out of the Cefiro that I ended up putting in my other Cefiro, I did a timing kit and water pump on that when I first got the car. The water pump got used for, I think, I drove the car like twice and then blew the head gasket, and yeah, it's sat around since and it hasn't had water sitting in it, so I know it should still be good. So yeah, I'm gonna go and grab that and retire this one to the bin. Now I went through before and I wiped all of the lifters, cleaned the cam caps and gave the cams a wipe too. Before I put the cams in, I'm just gonna go and put a bit of assembly lube on all of the areas where the camshaft sits. I'm about to tighten up the cam cap bolts, but unfortunately both the top two torque wrenches that I have don't go low enough, even the 3/8 one, to do these cams. So I'm having to use my Tool Pro one, but because this is only the cam caps and it's a pretty light torque setting, this should be safe. This shouldn't be too far out. But unfortunately the big Tool Pro one, yeah, I still didn't trust that to do things like the crank cradle bolts and the con rod. But yeah, it's something that's not trying to do so much force. It's definitely gonna be a bit more accurate. So I've set this to 11 Newton meters. Once again, just gonna start in the middle and work my way out. We have finally almost finished putting this motor together for today, or for the long block at least. I'm not going to be putting the manifolds on today or doing the cam gears and sorting out all the timing kit, because yeah, like I said, I've got to go and grab that water pump off my other motor, so I'm going to have to do that another time. Before I wrap this video up though, I am going to chuck my valve covers from the RB25 on here. They actually originally came off of this motor. I put some half moons in. These are from Franklin Engineering. These are some billet ones. These are pretty cool. The factory ones, once you take them off and reuse them a couple times, they tend to leak, so these billet ones are good. Got these caps on and I put the cam seals in. But now it's time to chuck these valve covers on. And all in an afternoon's work, we have a complete long block. It's been a bit of a mission, but I'm glad I got it done. I'm going to leave it off here for this video. And the next one, we're going to be putting both the exhaust manifold, new turbo on, and the intake manifold. And then once the manifolds are on, we can put the gearbox on the back of this thing, and then we'll be putting it into the Cefiro. All of that will be happening in the next video, so stay tuned guys. But as always, cheers for watching. You know the deal. Like, comment, subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow.